People say the truth always comes out, but nobody tells you what it costs when it finally does. For 14 years, I believed I had the perfect life. A beautiful wife. 2 amazing children. A successful business. A home filled with laughter. At least, that's what everyone else saw. But one ordinary Tuesday evening, my wife walked through our front door carrying grocery bags. I looked into her eyes and asked just 6 words that destroyed everything. "Do you still love Todd?" She froze. The grocery bag slipped from her hand. Milk spilled across the kitchen floor. She didn't ask who I meant. She didn't deny it. Instead, her face turned ghost white. Because for 14 years, she believed I would never discover the man she'd buried inside our marriage. She was wrong. They say the happiest families are the ones everyone envies. Looking back, I think we were just the best actors. For 14 years, I believed I had everything a man could ever want. A beautiful wife. 2 wonderful children. A successful construction business. A home in the suburbs where every weekend was filled with backyard barbecues, birthday parties, and family movie nights. To everyone around us, we were the couple people admired. Neighbors often joked that Emily and I would grow old together holding hands on the front porch. I believed them. Because I believed her. I met Emily when I was 28 years old. She wasn't the loudest woman in the room, but she had a quiet confidence that pulled people toward her. Her smile could calm any argument. Her laugh made even ordinary days feel special. We met at a friend's engagement party. She spilled wine on my shirt within the first 5 minutes. She apologized so many times that I finally laughed and told her, "If this is your way of asking for my number, it's working." She laughed too. That night changed my life. We dated for almost 2 years. Emily always seemed thoughtful. She remembered every birthday. She surprised me with handwritten notes. When I worked late building my construction company, she'd bring dinner to the office just so we could eat together. She made me feel like I wasn't fighting the world alone anymore. When I proposed by the lake where we'd had our first date, she cried before I even opened the ring box. She whispered, "I've been waiting for this." I never doubted her. Not for a second. Our wedding was beautiful. Friends called it magical. Family members couldn't stop talking about how perfect we looked together. My father hugged me after the ceremony and said, "Son, you've found the right woman." I believed every word. If only he'd been right. Within 3 years, our son Noah was born. 2 years later, our daughter Lily arrived. Life became wonderfully chaotic. Diapers. School projects. Family vacations. Christmas mornings filled with wrapping paper scattered across the living room floor. Emily looked like the perfect mother. The kids adored her. So did I. Whenever I looked around our dinner table, I thanked God for giving me this life. I had no idea I was thanking him for an illusion. As my business grew, so did our lifestyle. We bought a larger home. Emily started working part-time as a real estate agent after the kids entered school. She said she wanted something that belonged to her. I supported her completely. I never questioned where she went. I never checked her phone. I never doubted late meetings or weekend showings. That's what trust looks like. Or maybe that's what blind trust looks like. Around our 10th wedding anniversary, little things started changing. Emily began locking her phone. She'd smile while reading messages, then immediately flip the screen over whenever I walked into the room. Sometimes she'd leave the house saying she had an urgent client meeting. Other times she'd come home unusually happy, almost glowing. When I asked how her day had been, she'd answer with one-word responses. Fine. Busy. Long. The conversations that once lasted hours slowly disappeared. I convinced myself it was normal. Marriage changes. People get busy. Children grow. Careers become stressful. That's what everyone says. So I ignored the voice inside my head. The one whispering that something wasn't right. Then came our 14th anniversary. I planned a surprise dinner at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement. Emily smiled. She thanked me. She even kissed me. But during dinner, she checked her phone 6 times. Every notification made her smile. Not once did she look at me the way she looked at that screen. I felt invisible. Still, I said nothing. Because I loved her. And love has a dangerous habit. It explains away the things common sense is trying to warn you about. I had no idea that somewhere in Emily's past, there was a man whose name I had never heard. A name that would soon destroy everything I believed about my marriage. His name was Todd. And before long, that single name would turn my perfect family into the biggest betrayal of my life. Every marriage has secrets. The difference is, some secrets are harmless, and some are ticking time bombs. For weeks after our anniversary dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't one big event. It was dozens of tiny moments. Emily had started protecting her phone like it contained state secrets. She would leave the room whenever it rang. If I walked into the kitchen while she was texting, the screen would disappear before I could even glance at it. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd smile casually. Just work. Every single time. It was just work. At first, I believed her. Then I stopped believing in coincidences. About a month later, I attended a charity fundraiser hosted by one of my business clients. Emily couldn't make it because she claimed she had an evening showing for an expensive property. I went alone. The event was full of local business owners, real estate agents, and old friends. Near the dessert table, a woman walked toward me with a huge smile. "Mark! It's been forever." It took me a second to recognize her. Rachel. She had gone to college with Emily years before we met. We talked for a few minutes about life, the kids, and work. Then, completely out of nowhere, she asked a question that changed everything. "So, does Emily ever talk about Todd anymore?" I blinked. "Todd?" Rachel's smile disappeared instantly. "Oh." She looked like someone who had just realized she'd opened the wrong door. I thought you knew." "Knew what?" She quickly shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Forget I said anything." Then she excused herself and walked away. But it was too late. One word had planted a seed in my mind. Todd. Who was Todd? The drive home felt longer than usual. That single name echoed in my head over and over again. If Todd was nobody, why had Rachel reacted like that? And if Todd was somebody, why had Emily never mentioned him? When I got home, Emily was already asleep. At least, she pretended to be. Her phone was charging on the nightstand. For the first time in 14 years. I was tempted to look through it. I reached toward it. Then stopped. No, I whispered to myself. If I have to spy on my wife, I've already lost. I walked away. But sleep never came. The next evening, I decided to ask her directly. Nothing dramatic. Just casual conversation. We were cleaning up after dinner while the kids watched television. I dried a plate and smiled. Funny thing happened yesterday. Emily looked up. Oh. I ran into Rachel. Emily nodded. How's she doing? Good. I paused. She asked me if you ever talked about someone named Todd. For just a fraction of a second. Emily froze. It W. As barely noticeable. But I saw it. Then she laughed. Todd? Yeah. I don't know any Todd. Her answer came too quickly. Almost rehearsed. Not. I think you're mistaken. Not. Who's Todd? Just. I don't know any Todd. Then she immediately changed the subject. Can you hand me that towel? That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her reaction. It wasn't the words. It was her eyes. For 14 years, I'd known every expression on my wife's face. I knew when she was happy. I knew when she was worried. And I definitely knew when she was lying. She had lied to me. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly started paying attention. I wasn't trying to catch her. I was trying to prove myself wrong. Instead, everything became worse. She started working later. She deleted messages constantly. Sometimes she'd smile at her phone before locking it and placing it face down. One afternoon, I came home early from work. Emily wasn't there. Her car wasn't in the driveway. She had told me she would be home all day. When I called her, she didn't answer. 30 minutes later, she called back. Sorry, she said. I was showing a house. Something about her voice sounded rushed. Nervous. Almost guilty. That evening, after everyone went to bed, I opened my laptop. For the first time in my life, I searched for a private investigator. Just seeing those words on my screen made me feel sick. I loved my wife. I didn't want to believe she was hiding another man. But I also couldn't ignore what was happening. If I confronted her without proof, she'd deny everything. If I stayed silent, the questions would slowly destroy me. So I made the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, I called the investigator. I need to find out the truth, I said. There was a long silence before he replied. The truth is expensive. I stared out my office window and answered quietly. So is living a lie. I had no idea that within 2 weeks, a single brown envelope would reveal a betrayal that had begun before we were even married. The truth doesn't always arrive with sirens and explosions. Sometimes, it comes in a plain brown envelope. The private investigator asked me to meet him exactly 14 days later. No phone call. No email. Just a meeting. When I arrived at his office, he didn't waste time with small talk. He looked at me for a long moment before sliding a thick brown envelope across the desk. I've been doing this for 23 years, he said quietly. I've seen a lot of cheating spouses. He paused. But this one. He shook his head. This one is different. My hands suddenly felt heavy. I wasn't ready. But I opened the envelope anyway. Inside were photographs, phone records, hotel receipts, property records, printed emails, and dozens of screenshots. Every page made it harder to breathe. The very first photograph showed Eiley standing outside a downtown coffee shop. Across from her sat a man in his late 40s. Gray beginning to appear in his hair. Confident smile. The investigator pointed at the picture. That's Todd Harrison. I stared at his face. A stranger. Who somehow knew my wife better than I did. The investigator opened another folder. This didn't start recently. He spread several old photographs across the table. Some looked faded. Others had dates printed in the corner. The oldest photo stopped my heart. Emily. Wearing the same blue dress she had worn during the year we got engaged. Standing in Todd's arms. Kissing him. The date on the photograph was only 3 months before our wedding. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even blink. I kept staring at the date, hoping it would magically change. It didn't. The investigator continued. Emily and Todd met in college. They dated for almost 6 years. I felt my chest tighten. 6 years? He nodded. They planned to get married. So why didn't they? The investigator opened another document. Todd wasn't financially stable. He kept changing jobs. He wanted to start his own business. Emily wanted security. I closed my eyes. She hadn't married me because I was the love of her life. She married me because I was the safer choice. Then came the part that hurt even more. The investigator handed me copies of old emails. Most were years old. One message read, I wish things had been different. I'll always love you. Another message from Todd said, maybe in another life, we'd have our chance. The replies continued. 4 years. Even after our wedding. Even after Noah was born. Even after Lily came into our lives. The messages never completely stopped. Sometimes months passed without contact. Then suddenly, another conversation. Another secret. Another lie. I looked up at the investigator. So, are they together now? He hesitated. Then nodded slowly. Yes. My stomach dropped. They've been meeting regularly for the last 11 months. He showed me surveillance photos. Restaurants. Parks. Hotel lobbies. Long walks by the river. Nothing inappropriate in public. But every photograph showed something worse than physical affection. They looked comfortable. Like two people who had never stopped loving each other. Then he handed me something that completely changed everything. A copy of a property purchase agreement. Todd had recently bought a small lake house. The ownership records listed only his name. But several payments toward the down payment had come from Emily's personal bank account. Not our joint account. Her private savings. Nearly $85,000. I stared at the number. My wife wasn't just hiding another man. She had secretly helped him buy a future. A future that clearly didn't include me. I drove home in complete silence. The envelope sat on the passenger seat like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every traffic light felt endless. Every mile reminded me of the life I'd built. The children waiting at home. The memories. The birthdays. The anniversaries. Were any of them real? Or had I simply been financing someone else's love story? That evening, Emily came home smiling. She kissed the kids. She asked me how work had been. Then she started making dinner. As if nothing in the world had changed. She had no idea I already knew. I watched her laughing with our children. For a brief moment, I almost threw the envelope into the fireplace. Because exposing the truth would destroy our family forever. But another voice inside me whispered. She made that choice the moment she chose deception over honesty. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. Dangerously calm. Because I had already decided something. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse her. I wasn't even going to show her the evidence. Instead, I was going to ask her one simple question. A question only a guilty person could answer. And her response would expose everything. Sometimes, you don't need to accuse a liar. You just need to ask the one question they never expected. For 3 days, I carried that envelope everywhere. It sat in my truck while I drove to work. It rested inside my office drawer during meetings. At night, it stayed locked in my safe. Not because I was protecting the evidence. Because I was protecting myself. Every time I looked at those photographs, I felt the same question burning inside me. Why? Why marry me if your heart belonged to someone else? Why build a family on a foundation of lies? And worst of all, why let our children believe they were growing up in a home filled with love? I deserved answers. But I knew something after 14 years of marriage. If I confronted Emily with evidence first, she would explain. She would cry. She would blame loneliness, stress, or my long work hours. No. I wanted the truth before the excuses. So I made a plan. Friday evening arrived. The kids were spending the night at my sister's house for a weekend camping trip. For the first time in months, Emily and I would be alone. I came home early. I cooked dinner. I lit candles. I even opened the bottle of wine we'd been saving since our last anniversary. Everything looked normal. Exactly as I wanted. At 6:18 p.m., I heard her car pull into the driveway. My heart began pounding. The front door opened. Emily walked inside carrying 2 grocery bags. She smiled when she saw the table. Wow, what's all this? I smiled back. I thought we deserved a quiet evening together. She kissed my cheek. That's sweet. She walked into the kitchen and placed the grocery bags on the counter. For a brief moment, everything looked like the life we used to have. Then I spoke. Emily. She turned around. Yeah. I looked directly into her eyes. No anger. No shouting. Just one calm question. Do you still love Todd? Time stopped. The smile disappeared from her face. One of the grocery bags slipped from her fingers. A carton of milk hit the floor and burst open. White milk spread across the kitchen tiles. Neither of us moved. Her breathing became shallow. Her hands started shaking. She stared at me, like she'd just seen a ghost. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered, Him? Not. Who's Todd? Not. What are you talking about? Just him? In that single word, she confessed everything. Tears instantly filled her eyes. She grabbed the kitchen counter to steady herself. Mark. I can explain. I slowly shook my head. No. I asked a simple question. Do you love him? She covered her face with both hands. For nearly a minute. The only sound in the room was her crying. Finally, she whispered. I never stopped. Those 4 words hit harder than any punch. 14 years. 2 children. Thousands of memories. Destroyed by one sentence. I walked to my office. Opened the safe. Returned with the brown envelope. Without saying a word, I placed it on the dining table. Emily stared at it. Then at me. Slowly. She opened it. The first photograph appeared. Her face lost every bit of color. She flipped through page after page. The hotel receipts. The bank transfers. The surveillance photos. The emails. Each page made her shoulders sink lower. By the end, she wasn't crying anymore. She looked defeated. I didn't know how to end it, she whispered. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. You had 14 years. You had thousands of chances. You could have ended it before we got married. You could have ended it after Noah was born. You could have ended it after Lily. You could have ended it yesterday. But you didn't. She fell to her knees. I'm sorry. I was confused. I loved both of you. I looked at her in disbelief. No. You loved yourself. You loved having a stable husband. And a secret soulmate. Those words broke her. She sobbed uncontrollably. But something inside me had changed. The man who would have done anything to save his marriage was gone. Standing in his place was a father who needed to protect his children from a lifetime of deception. I picked up my phone. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Her head snapped upward. What? I filed for divorce this morning. For the first time that night. Real fear appeared in her eyes. She realized this wasn't another argument. This wasn't something flowers or apologies could fix. This was the end. But Emily still didn't understand one thing. Losing me wasn't going to be the biggest consequence of her betrayal. Bika, use karma, had already started moving toward Todd. And neither of them saw it coming. The hardest part of betrayal isn't losing the person you loved, it's realizing they were never the person you thought they were. The morning after Emily admitted everything, the house felt empty. Not because she had packed a suitcase, but because the illusion we'd lived in for 14 years had finally disappeared. There was no yelling. No broken dishes. No dramatic scene. Just silence. The kind of silence that only follows the death of a marriage. Emily sat at the dining table, staring at a cold cup of coffee. She looked exhausted. As if one night of truth had aged her 10 years. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I looked at her calmly. Yet somehow, you managed to do it every single day for 14 years. She lowered her eyes. There was nothing left to say. The divorce process moved quickly. I had already gathered every document my attorney needed. The evidence of the affair. The financial records showing Emily had secretly transferred thousands of dollars to Todd. The investigators' reports. The emails. The photos. When Emily's attorney saw the evidence, he advised her not to fight the case. She agreed. There was no defense for 14 years of deception. The hardest conversation wasn't with Emily. It was with Noah and Lily. I sat them down in the living room. They looked confused. "Dad, why is Mom crying all the time?" I took a deep breath. "Your mother and I aren't going to live together anymore." Lily immediately started crying. Noah stared at the floor. Neither child asked whose fault it was. Children don't care about blame. They only care about losing the family they thought they had. That day broke my heart more than discovering the affair ever did. I promised them one thing. No matter what happens between your mom and me, I will always be your father. And you will always be my first priority. A few weeks later, Emily officially moved out. She rented a small apartment across town. Not because she wanted independence. Because she believed Todd was finally going to build the future they dreamed about for years. She thought her fairy tale was finally beginning. She couldn't have been more wrong. 3 months after the divorce, I received a phone call from the private investigator. "You might want to know this," he said. "Todd just got arrested." I was silent. For what? Financial fraud. My heart skipped a beat. The investigator explained that Todd's construction company had been running an investment scam. He had borrowed money from friends, clients, and business partners, promising huge returns. Instead, he used that money to pay old debts and fund his lifestyle. The scheme eventually collapsed. Federal investigators froze his bank account. NTS. His lake house was seized. His business closed overnight. Everything Emily had secretly helped him build was gone. A month later, Emily called me. Her voice was shaking. "Mark, Todd lied to me." I closed my eyes. What happened? He never loved me the way I thought. He admitted he only stayed close because I kept helping him financially. The words hung in the air. The man she had risked her marriage for had been using her, just as she had used me. Karma had completed its circle. 6 months later, I ran into Emily outside the courthouse during a custody meeting. She looked completely different. The expensive handbags were gone. The designer clothes had disappeared. The confidence she'd once carried had been replaced by regret. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I threw away everything. I nodded. Yes. I know. She hesitated before asking the question I never expected. If I had told you the truth years ago, would you have forgiven me? I thought about it for a long moment. Then I answered honestly. If you had chosen honesty before betrayal, maybe. But every day you lied. You made that choice again. There wasn't just one betrayal, Emily. There were thousands. One for every morning. One for every kiss. One for every anniversary. One for every promise you never intended to keep. She began crying. I quietly walked away. Some apologies come years too late. 2 years passed. My construction company grew larger than ever. Noah made the varsity baseball team. Lily won her school's writing competition. Life slowly found a new rhythm. It wasn't the life I'd imagined. But it was real. For the first time in years. There were no secrets. No lies. No pretending. One evening, while watching the sunset from my back porch, Noah sat beside me. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Do you hate Mom?" I smiled sadly. "No. Hate keeps you trapped in the past." "So, do you forgive her?" I looked toward the fading sunlight. "I forgive her. But forgiveness doesn't mean inviting someone back into your life. It means refusing to let their betrayal control your future." Noah nodded quietly. "I think I understand." I wrapped an arm around his shoulder. "Remember this, son. Lies can build a beautiful life for a while, but only the truth can keep it standing." And in the end, karma didn't destroy Emily. It simply made her live with the choices she had made. Because the cruelest punishment isn't revenge. It's waking up every morning, knowing you lost the one person who truly loved you. For someone who never loved you at all. The end.